Hello, my name is Renata von Tscharner. I'm the founder and president of the Charles River Conservancy. And we're going to talk about the parklands along our wonderful river. We are so fortunate to have this river in our city with all its publicly owned parklands. And I'll be talking about a project today which is called River Stories. But before I talk about river stories, I just want to kind of give you an update of what has been happening at the Conservancy and on the parklands. As you might know, the Charles River Conservancy was started in 2000, and now we have over 25,000 volunteers and supporters of this organization to make the parklands more active, attractive, and accessible to all. And if you want to know more, we have a website. It's thecharles.org. Let me just give you a bit of an update on the project. You might have read about the underpasses that we help to advocate for along the Boston side of the Charles River to create a 7-mile long uninterrupted stretch. And we just heard from Mass DOT that they are now going ahead to do the design for the Anderson Bridge, and then at the later stage we'll do Western Avenue and River Street as well. And I want to thank all the officials from Cambridge for their help. There were also many groups in Cambridge, the runners, the bikers, the cycle kids, very many groups. There were over 43 groups altogether that joined this advocacy effort, and we will be working with Mass DOT to implement those underpasses. You probably also associate the Charles River Conservancy with the skate park, which will be in East Cambridge, and we just received 1.5 million from Vans, a wonderful gift to make it possible to build this skate park in the North Point Park. And as you walk along the Charles, you might have seen our volunteers. We have some 2,000 volunteers every year, and they do daffodil planting, they prune the trees, they paint the benches, they remove invasives. And if that's something that interests you, I encourage you to join them. And just recently we had another community swim. That it was in Boston, but we hope next year we will have community swims in Cambridge. But now let's go to the parklands and river stories. A few years back, we commissioned a publication called River Stories, and we commissioned people to do watercolors for this publication. Wonderful watercolors here by Frank Costantino, who is a professional and very talented artist. And then this publication was so well received, we did another volume in 2010 for our 10th anniversary. And I will read a little story, a little part of the story in it by Anita Diamond, a nationally known author who did The Red Tent and also the book Day After Night. She describes her way back from the airport. There are 2 ways to drive from the airport to my house. One is a straight shot on a wide highway that requires almost nothing in the way of animal cunning to navigate. The other road twists and bends and scares the wits out of novices. I am no hot dog, but I always choose the second road. It follows the river. Look, I say to my out-of-town guests, in any season, I say, isn't it wonderful? They agree, of course, because it is patently wonderful to have a river in our city. I do not mean to slight neighborhood lakes and ponds, nor is a harbor view anything to sneeze at. Any body of water is like a sigh of relief in the non-stop urban conversation. Every vista that turns sunlight into liquid stars gives respite and healing to eyes weary from pavement and page. these are some of the images in that River Stories Volume 2. We're looking here at the North Point Park with the Grady Bridge. And we all know the Cambridge Boat Club. Here on the Esplanade, a view from EF over to the House of Correction, also in the New Basin. A detail of the building near the Grady Bridge and the Zaken Bridge. A wonderful detail of the pavilion at the Museum of Science. Then the watercolors, I love them because they capture the spirit of the river with the water and the lightness, even on a dark day when it is misty along the river. I want to read just another little part from Anita Diamond's story. But even at a distance, the river makes its peace. When the morning commuters come rumbling out of the subway tunnel and over the bridge, the water view makes them forget themselves and perk up. Maybe it makes them remember the last time they started out to sea. The city looks lovely, but not imposing. The river puts things into perspective. I feel sorry for people from the other side of town who have never seen the fog hang rise like upside down on the river's surface, or the red and green lights guiding starboard and aft in the dark, hung on arches whose curves date from Rome, which sits on the Tiber. Sometimes, even in the middle of the day, you can catch the river scent, the cool, neutral, sweet scent of fresh water. It smells wonderful. Well, Anita Diamond, last year when we had the first community swim, a really historic event in July, she came to the swim and loved it and wrote a piece about swimming. So this publication, you can find it on the Charles River Conservancy's website, has stories by about 15 authors and many wonderful illustrations. And because this was such a success, people loved it and it has become a collector's item, we decided to do another edition. And so we will this time not continue with images of the river, but we will have artistic maps as illustrations. So the River Stories 3 is planned for 2015 with 12 to 15 stories, and it will have quotes as well by community leaders, and as I mentioned, it will have historic maps. And some of the maps will be truly historic, but let me tell you a little bit more about the authors who will be contributing. We are very lucky that we already have a commitment from Tom Ashbrook, the radio host, and he has written a short memoir about canoeing on the river while first courting his wife. And we have a poem from David Ferry, a longtime Cambridge resident and winner of national awards, and he describes how he is strolling along the river in the summer. Another Cambridge professor at Harvard is the Shakespeare scholar Stephen Greenblatt, who has written an essay describing his walks along the parklands and reflecting on the fascinating evolution of the ethnic groups, now thoroughly global, who use the river, especially on the Brighton shore. We also will have a story by Sarah Hall, who is a rower. She became a rower midlife and became a rowing champion. Another person who knows the river very well is Peter Howe. He used to be with the Globe and he's now with New England Cable News, and he has covered the Charles River since the 90s. Another writer is David Gessner. He's a naturalist and he has written several books and one about the Charles River called My Green Manifesto, documenting a canoe trip along the Charles River with Dan Driscoll. A woman who has written many young adults' histories and stories is Lisa Ketchum. She's a resident of Watertown and an environmental advocate. Another Cambridge resident is Florence Ladd, and she's a distinguished academic, administrator, novelist, and she has submitted 2 poems that will be a great addition to River Story 3. Then we have a Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer, Megan Marshall, and she has written portraits of 19th century female intellectuals, and we look forward to reading her take on the Charles River. Somebody who has built on the Charles River is William Rahn. He did the recently finished Tara Hall at the Harvard Business School and will reflect on interacting with the river as an architect. Many know him as the architect in the book called The House by Tracy Kidder. Nancy C. Scholes, she did a book called Gaining Ground. She's a scholar, and she will be talking about the river from her perspective. Anne Sexton did a lovely poem about the river, and we'll include that, as well as some historic text by David Thoreau and, of course, Longfellow. So we will have maps, and I'm showing some of these maps because they might inspire you to submit a map. These are maps made by map makers, but since they didn't have very accurate information, they also have a wonderful artistic quality to them. This is more of a bird's eye view of all the river crossings between North Station and North Point Park, where they were at some stage there were 20 river crossings, and right now we just have the railroad crossing, which soon will be paralleled by a pedestrian crossing, and we have the crossing, of course, of the Green Line. A little map from Cambridge, very early Cambridge, when Harvard Square just started to be settled, and we still see the marshland on the Boston side. Now the river in the context, the Charles River in the context of the Mystic River, of the Muddy River and the Emerald Necklace, and then at the bottom of the Neponset River. And actually the Neponset River carries about a third of the water of the Charles, which is guided into the Neponset River. That was done to make the mills operate better on the Neponset River. The Charles River, that is the area that the Conservancy works on from the harbor up to the Watertown Dam. So it's 20 miles of shoreline and about 400 acres of publicly owned parklands owned and maintained by the Department of Conservation and Recreation and the various communities. Brookline almost touching the river, and Boston touching it from Brighton, Allston to the Back Bay and Beacon Hill, as well as Johnstown. And again, Somerville almost touching the river, and soon the community path that will cross Somerville will also come to the river and make it easier for bicyclists to get to the river. I mentioned earlier the underpasses. This is a map that shows of how a 7.5 mile long stretch along the river will allow uninterrupted bicycling from the Museum of Science all the way to the Arsenal Bridge. And the 3 bridges that right now are in the way and where underpasses will be built so that the bicyclists and the runners and walkers don't have to fight the traffic, or the Anderson Bridge, which is under construction, and for which the design of the underpasses is now starting. And then Western and River Street will come later when those are being restored. So here are some ideas of how interpretations of a map could enrich this the illustrations of River Story 3, all the various bridges, and there are some wonderful bridges across the Charles, from the Zachem Bridge, and right next to the Zachem Bridge will soon be a new bridge, the Charlestown Bridge on North Washington Street, which is being designed by Miguel Rosales. And then, of course, the Zachem Bridge and the Longfellow Bridge. And next to the Longfellow Bridge, not shown here, will be a new pedestrian bridge linking Charlestown Circle with the Esplanade, a much more elegant and accessible bridge for pedestrians and bicyclists. Then we have the Harvard Bridge, which most people know as the Mass Avenue Bridge, but it's called the Harvard Bridge because it used to be the closest connection between Harvard and Boston. The BU Bridge, both the BU Bridge proper and the Railroad Bridge, which we hope will become a connector also for bicyclists and pedestrian in the future. Then we come to the two bridges where that underpasses will be added, River Street and Western, and the lovely pedestrian bridge, which also carries the steam to the business school, the Weeks Bridge, the Anderson Bridge, the Eliot Bridge, named after Charles Eliot and his father, who were so instrumental in creating those parklands. We can be very grateful to them. The son was a landscape architect and the father was president of Harvard. And after his son had already died, wrote a book about his son's ideas for the parklands. Then the Arsenal Bridge, the North Beacon Street Bridge, and then the Galen Street Bridge. Lovely bridges, which are here just sketched, but that would make a wonderful map for the River Stories 3. What these green patches are all the various playgrounds along the river. So there are probably close to 24 playgrounds along the urban Charles River, and many of them have water features for children to play in. Some are for very small children, and others have basketballs, climbing structures. So an extraordinary wealth of recreational opportunities exist along the river, and it would be wonderful to have a map showing those. This mixture of lines and curves, this is how we experience the river as a motorist, be it on the turnpike, which runs from left to right on the south side of the river, or the Zachem Bridge, I-93, which is just in the top right corner. And often we are overwhelmed by all the traffic and all the roads, and it's important to get an important balance between those two modes of transportation. And you might have heard about the realigning of the turnpike at the Olston exit. And so there's a great opportunity to add some facilities for bicyclists and walkers, and to break this Chinese wall syndrome of the turnpike, which now exists between Brookline and the river. Great opportunities as this project is moving ahead, and I hope somebody can capture all the roads and the struggles with roads that exist along the Charles River. This map was created by our volunteer coordinator Danielle Stellig for the Earth Day this year. The Conservancy had some 800 volunteers just on Earth Day alone, and in order for the volunteers to get organized and to have all the right supplies and know where they have to work, she created this map which lists all the various groups that will be working. And since she had so many volunteers, she even had some volunteers clean up the road, the connection between Central Square and the river. And I think this map, looked at closer, has a lot of potential to show of how people care for the river and adopt a part of the river, either just for a day or for a longer period, like Gensheim has been working on the river, Novartis has been working on the river. So there's a lot of attention that flows to the river in terms of planting bulbs, pruning trees, and it would be wonderful to capture all that volunteer effort as it flows into the river. Now, some people just love to play with the shape of that river and those parklands. Obviously, the parklands depicted here are a little bit more generous than they actually are, but sometimes it helps to have some wishful thinking and to push the parklands into the neighborhoods, because this is such important public land that we all need to breathe, to run, to enjoy, and to enjoy the Sunday Parkland games that take place every Sunday near the Weeks Footbridge between the river and Memorial Drive. Then somebody really got into the nitty-gritty of this blue and green, of this wonderful river, how it bends and creates illusions. You think you're going straight, but because you follow the river, you suddenly are at the right angle and find yourself moving in a different direction. So there are many ways of using that river to create some artistic renderings. So if you are intrigued by this notion of river maps, of kind of artistic renderings of these different aspects of the river, I hope you'll take out your drawing pad, your pencils, and sketch something and send it to us. We would love to see it, and what we cannot put into the River Story 3, we can put on our website. We can include it in our publication, in other publications, but we would love to hear from you about your ideas of how you see the river, what you love about the river, different aspects. I just showed a few, like the bridges and the playgrounds and the roads. For instance, it would be wonderful to show where you can put a boat into the water, or how a rower experiences the river. There might be people who are tree lovers who might show what kind of trees can be found along the river, or where you go to listen to birds. So there are many ways to interpret the river, and I hope you will submit some of them. I have here one that is goes a little bit in the direction of Kandinsky, where somebody took some projects of the Charles River Conservancy, the skate park in North Point Park, which is going to be a regional attraction, how that will be a focal point. Then this golden bar in the middle is the illumination of the Harvard Bridge. That's a project that will be implemented next year. And then along the river are the Sunday Parkland Games, where hundreds of families gather every Sunday to play with equipment, all different sizes. And then the round symbol there with the opening is a symbol for the Underpasses, a major advocacy effort that has been spearheaded by the Conservancy. And the green patterns are the volunteers. So there's an effort to look at different ways of interpreting the Charles River Conservancy's efforts along the river. Then Caroline Neuberger, who did the cover of River Story 3, a very talented artist. She went even a step further in terms of abstraction. She started off with a river and then added elements to it and made it a vibrant, colorful expression of her love of the river. So if you just joined us, this is the Charles River Conservancy Parkland show, and our shows can also be seen on YouTube. And if you are interested to learn more about swimming in the Charles, or our volunteer program, our Underpass program, there are old new YouTube shows that you can watch on these subjects, and we would love to hear from you. We are an organization that depends on support of people like you, people who care about the river, people who want to help by coming out as a volunteer or want to make a contribution. We do get some corporate gifts as well as foundation gifts. So if any of these elements are of interest to you, please let us know. And thank you very much, and please watch again as we move forward with the work on the Charles River. Thank you very much.